and he began to speak to them in parables. A man planted a vineyard and put a fence around it, and dug a vat under the wine press and built a tower, and leased it to vine growers, and went on a journey. And at the harvest time he sent a slave to the vine growers in order to receive his share of the produce of the vineyard from the vine growers. And they took him and beat him and sent him away empty-handed. And again he sent them another slave, and they wounded him in the head and treated him shamefully. And he sent another, and that one they killed. And so with many others, beating some and killing others. He had one more man to send, a beloved son. He sent him to the last of all, saying, "They will respect my son." But those vine growers said to one another, "This is the heir. Come, let's kill him, and the inheritance will be ours." And they took him and killed him, and threw him out of the vineyard. What will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come and put the vine growers to death, and give the vineyard to others. Have you not even read this scripture? A stone which the builders rejected, this has become the chief cornerstone. This came about from the Lord, and it is marvelous in our eyes. And they were seeking to seize him, and yet they feared the people, and they understood that he told the parable against them. And so they left him and went away. All right. So tenant farming was actually a really common thing there in Israel. And disputes like this would actually happen. Now, maybe not with the murder, but like...
Yeah, hopefully not.
Yeah, but...
I mean, maybe.
Yeah, but typically, anyone who had use of a land for 3 years was presumed to own it in the absence of any alternative claim. So if I were to lease the field to you, and I leave for 5 years, and you never hear from me again, and I come back 5-6 years later, it's like, I've been taking care of this, all this time. This is rightfully mine now, right?
You said that it was 3 years was the
3 years
rule?
was, yeah.
Okay.
And
so that was squatters' rights, basically.
Squatters' rights, yeah.
3 years.
Well, I remember when I was in high school, a buddy of mine, his dad owned a business, and he bought like a second house that he was running his business out of. Yeah. And it had this giant property behind it, and he paid myself and his son to go back and clear, because it was all wooded, the outline of his property.
Okay.
And there was even like a section of it that looked like it went through the neighbor's property. Mm-hmm. And we were like hesitant to do anything there. And he was like, no. We need to mark this, because if he takes care of this land, he'll be able to take claim of it based on the, the statutes in our area.
Sure. Yeah.
So like this is not, while that was a much smaller claim, that's kind of the same thing that could have happened here.
Right.
Right. So in the parable, the owner is trying to claim his land, though. But the tenants are silencing his claim. Every time a servant comes, they chase him off, they beat him, and then eventually start killing. Mm-hmm. Right. So the tenants in this case were understood to be the leadership of Israel, and the land Israel itself was Israel itself, as was a common analogy for a vineyard. So Israel was often referred to as a vineyard.
Right.
So I think this here is where the religious leaders kind of understood this, right?
This was the first one they got without him having to explain it.
Yeah. Like, that was about us.
Right.
Yeah. And so the claim here is that the people of Israel and the religious leaders were known to reject and drive out the prophets, and Jesus was prophesying that they would do the same to him, and were doing the same to him, but that he was in fact the Son of God.
Yeah.
Right. So he was this elevated character at the end. And so it really lines up with everything we've read in these last few chapters and the theme of Mark, that Jesus carries an authority that the religious leaders were jealous of. Mm-hmm. So Jesus explains, though, that this will lead to their destruction at the hands of his Father. And at this point, the religious leaders want to arrest him. Like they're like, hey, this was about us. This parable about you being murdered, or about this son being murdered, is about us and you. Yeah. And their immediate response is, well, then let's do the thing that they were doing in the parable.
Right.
But they were scared. They were afraid, because the people around, would have rejected them doing that.
Right. Yeah. They knew that, they weren't this. While it was like this parable where these tenants, they knew that if they thought that if they killed the son, that they would get it and there wouldn't be any punishment. They knew that there were other people around, and there were other people that knew Jesus, and there were other people that loved Jesus, and they knew that they would, there'd be a riot or a lot of angry folks if they had done that. So that's and they had been, it talks about earlier, even well before this, that they had been plotting and plotting. You hear about them plotting long before this. They plot how they can arrest Jesus. They've been plotting how they can arrest him and try him, but they just never had the right opportunity, and they never really had the right evidence. And they just and sometimes it was just like Jesus did like a Jedi mind trick, like, this is not the man you're looking for. Like, you are not going to take me. Like, they just and they walked away.
He just kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
Got away. And I wonder too if they understood that the parable was about them. I wonder if they thought, well, the people around probably know it's about us too.
Yeah.
So if we act on it, then we play right into it.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, that's as we'll see obviously later, they put him on trial for kind of bogus charges, and instead of just taking him and killing him, they had to figure out, okay, if we arrest him and we do this and we put him on trial, then we could say, well, it was because of this.
They worked really hard to try to take what was an illegitimate issue and make it a legitimate.
Yeah, they were just building their case.
Exactly. Yeah.